Everyone is here, Maria, under strict instructions to try and hide their overexcitement at you being here. How would you say we're doing?
Oh,
brilliantly.
It's so wonderful here, I gotta say, thank you.
Not all truisms are true, and you should meet your heroes. When you meet your heroes, certainly in this case, you find that everything you've read and everything you've heard is nothing quite as good as the person themselves. Because when you meet them, you're like, oh, life is quite simple. A combination of energy, courage, and cheerfulness can probably change the world. So we are incredibly excited to have you here, Maria. Probably most people here will know a little of the story of Maria Ressa. Not just the Nobel Peace Prize, not just the founding of Rappler, not just many years on our screens at CNN trying to make sense of the world and Southeast Asia's part in it. But I think someone who is helping us, and this is really the heart of our conversation this evening, helping us understand not just the world you're living in the Philippines, but how that is a mirror of the world we're all living in terms of technology. Just to give you a sense of the slightly chaotic way we try and do this, Maria, is when we started Tortoise, we'd all come from different newsrooms, and we all thought this was a bit unfair because you get to meet extraordinary people, and that's one of the great joys of journalism, but how would you open the doors of your newsroom and make sure everyone gets that opportunity? So if you've been to if you've been to Tortoise before, you'll know that it's a chance, I hope, for everyone to weigh in. If you've got a point you want to make to Maria, a thought that you want to put to her, don't wait politely till the end, just catch my eye and I'll make sure that you're brought into the conversation. I'm going to try and make the most of having the chance to talk to you first, though, Maria, and I wanted to, normally what you do is you read someone's book, you start at the beginning, obviously being journalists, you cheat, you go to the end, you read the epilogue.
Read the end first.
But actually, with your book, I wanted to start with a chapter in the middle. With this chapter 7, you'll understand why it caught my eye. Think slow, not fast, you say. But it's really the chapter that looks at the impact of Facebook on the politics of the Philippines.
Yeah.
And your life as a journalist and your reading of what technology has done to democracy and truth. And I wonder whether you'd start there and tell us what your judgment is of what technology has done to the truth.
Oh, wow. Oh, well, first of all, thank you. It's so nice to be here, and thank you for taking time out and for having me here. This is chapter 7. Every chapter title, the title is the macro, and the subtitle in italics is the micro. So macro as journalist, and then micro. The chapter title is How Friends of Friends Broke Democracy. And then the subtitle, which is my personal lesson, Think Slow, Not Fast. So How Friends of Friends Broke Democracy is an algorithm. It's an algorithm of growth that every social media platform uses, right? And think, my quick definition of an algorithm is opinion in code. Right? So somebody randomly said, well, it's actually A/B testing. So they tested it to figure out how can they keep us scrolling? Because in the attention economy, it is our attention that they want. So Friends of Friends is a recommendation algorithm that really kicked in. 2016 was when we began to see the impact, and now we feel the impact. In 2016, in the Philippines, we didn't debate the facts. There are lots of different voices, but we all kind of agreed on the facts. That would be here, right? But the Friends of Friends algorithm, once you elect a divisive leader, and you can replace Rodrigo Duterte with any other leader you would like who fits the description, Friends of Friends algorithm in 2016, if you were pro-Duterte, you moved further right. And then the Friends of Friends algorithm, if you're anti-Duterte, you moved further left. So you grew your social media network, and the platform itself grew because you grew your network. 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, right? So people talk about echo chambers or being polarized. It's an algorithm, Friends of Friends. And how the subtitle was I think that was around the time, and it was data. We had the data. It was around that time when I began to realize that we came out in 2016 with a weaponization of the internet series, 3-part series. I went to Facebook first and showed them the data because we were essentially alpha partners. And I thought that if they saw this, that they would then, I asked for more data and a statement. And I thought if they saw this, that, oh wow, we can prevent bad things from happening. And the data I showed them included a manual counting of how 26 fake accounts can impact at least 3 million others. We manually counted this for 3 months. It took us that long, right? And when I went to there, this was in Singapore. It was we were in this great, wonderful space, and the people I was talking to, our partners, didn't really understand it, but they could see I was agitated, and I cared more that Facebook do something about it versus getting the story out, right? So I said, please think about it, show it to your data guys, and then let me know. I'd love to get more data, and then at the very least, please give us a statement. We waited. And then at a certain point, maybe after about a month or so, I decided to go ahead with it. So that's this chapter. This chapter tells you our discovery, how after we released this 3-part weaponization of the internet series, I wrote 2 of the 3 parts. The first part is weaponization of the internet. The second is how Facebook algorithms impact democracy. And then the third is manufactured reality. This is the one with 26 fake accounts that rippled.
But just tell us, Maria, I mean, one of the things, the book tells the story of your life, extraordinary, sort of starting out brushing your teeth with salt water, you're so poor, and the schools and the friendships and the sort of inspirations and all of those. Then you're suddenly at work in the Philippines, and you say something amazing about the Philippines, which is its internet usage amongst the Filipino population is higher than anywhere else in the world, and greater usage, greater downloads. So what you experienced then in 16, 17 was, if you like, a harbinger of what was to come for the rest of us. When you went and had that conversation with Facebook, because they then did bring you into, was it called the Integrity Project, this effort to try and, if you like, get the drains up and say, how do we make sure we protect facts and secure truth?
Yeah, I was there at the beginning of when you could see, and I saw this in CNN. I joined CNN when we were Chicken Noodle News. The BBC correspondent in Manila is right there during that time period. So at CNN, I realized we grew fast. And so I was patient. A startup grows fast. We've been there, right? Yeah. And so I was hoping that they would take the right actions. And I took part from 2016 all the way to 2018 when we became one of 2 Filipino fact-checking partners of Facebook. We're still partners technically, but now I think they probably see me as a frenemy. And because the data is very clear. But here's,
But why did they not? But why, Maria, do you think they didn't act? What happened?
Money. I mean, it took until 2019 before we named the business model that is so harmful, that commoditizes our attention, our behavior. So Shoshana Zuboff, in her book published 2019, she called it surveillance capitalism, right? I describe it a slightly different way, which is that everything that you post is picked up by machine learning, and they will tell you that then builds a model of you that knows you better than you know yourself. Replace model with clone, right? So we are cloned, and because they cloned us, i.e., let's just say, like, if it's physically, we're in a hospital, because the hospital was the one that cloned us, they own our clones. That's the database. So AI then comes in and picks up all of our clones and brings it. That's the motherlode database for micro-targeting, which is a system of advertising that is very, very far from what the old advertising used to be, because this database allows micro-targeting. It is extremely efficient because it takes your weakest moment to a message and sells it, and you don't know it. I call that insidious manipulation.
So, and you say something sort of very interesting about them, and in fact, you're quite personal about Mark Zuckerberg putting company before country. I wanted to raise that with everyone because there's an element of Maria's book and all of your work, which is much more around journalism and the truth and facts and the idea of rule of law in every country. It's not just about what you've been through in the Philippines. But will you just tell us what you actually have been through in the Philippines? Because it's been quite hard just to track how many cases there are against you, how many of them sit with Duterte, how many of them now sit with the Marcos government.
Yeah.
So can you give us the version of, and we're Tortoise, you don't need to do it quickly, Rappler, how it started and how you've got to the place that you're at, where you're under, I think, 7 different court cases?
Yes. Yeah.
So tell us about it.
Oh my gosh. Well, we grew up in the golden age of journalism, I think, when there were resources for news organizations. And we knew the mission. The mission is to speak truth to power. We were the connective tissue. We got our power from the people. Rappler was something we created in 2011 was when I began to raise money for Rappler. It only cost $2 million only, but compared to everyone else in the West, that's not that much. Anyway, so raised $2 million. What was this? It was, my elevator pitch was simple. We build communities of action, and the food we feed our communities is journalism. Because for all those times I had been with CNN, it was almost 2 decades, and then I came home to head the largest news organization in the Philippines, ABS-CBN. That network has lost its television franchise under Duterte. When I came home, I wanted to stop throwing stories into a black hole. I spent most of my career bridging the gap between the reality we live in my countries in Southeast Asia and your understanding of, and making you care about that. Like, why does it matter if Indonesians are wearing their jilbabs more, right? Why does it matter if it's the end of 32 years of Suharto? Or in the Philippines, if we have 7 coup attempts against Cory Aquino, why does it matter? Why should you care? We spent our entire careers learning to do that. And what I was excited about choosing to come home to the Philippines, creating Rappler, was that we could use, and here's, social media for social good, social media for social change, that technology could help jumpstart development in countries like ours. And it really can. If we had put the right guardrails in place, we were on the way to doing that. That was the idea behind Rappler. Look, I went from managing 1,000 journalists to 12, including myself. And that was, it's fun to have a startup, right? You never stop working. But our goal was to put television in your pocket, television news. I did broadcast journalism, as did you. So our goal, the business goal, was break even in half the time it takes a traditional news group to do it, 5 years. And we were well on the way to that. Grow our audience so that the Philippines is also a young demographic. The median age is 23 years old. That's part of the reason. That's also the median age of Rappler, and not by design. So by 2016, we were well on the way. That was break-even year. 2016 was also the year the political dominoes began to fall. The Philippines was first in May. You had Brexit. And then we had all these other elections that culminated with November in Trump in the United States. And this is where you can see the power of technology companies that distribute the news to us, but do not make a distinction between lies and facts. In fact, the lies spread faster than facts. This is a distribution problem and a design. It is by design. This is an MIT study from 2018. Social media spreads lies faster than facts. And if it's laced with anger and hate and fear, even more, right? So think about the incentive structure that we live in today. You get widest distribution if you lie. Would you tell your kids to do that? This goes to the values. I mean, part of the reason I wrote the book the way I did was because everyone kept asking me, oh, where did it wind up? In 2018, the Philippine government tried to shut us down. Well, the attacks bottom-up information operations began in 2016. A year later, President Duterte attacked with the same thing, journalist equals criminal bottom-up. People believe it. And then top-down, President Duterte says it. He doesn't say it at a press conference. He says it in his State of the Nation address. So we were covering it live, kind of like this, and we had him live. And, I was anchoring, and when he said that, you just have to stop. And then I looked at my co-founders, and I tweeted, Mr. President, you're wrong, right? We're not. So after that, a week later, we got our first subpoena. In 2018, we had 14 investigations. 2018, January, the government tries to shut us down. Within 4 months, we dropped 49% of our advertising revenue. This is a war of attrition. We would have gone bankrupt by the end of 2018 if we didn't find an alternative, sustainable business model, which we did. Nietzsche is right, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, And our team was much more. We knew our mission. That same day that it was announced that the government was trying to shut us down, I held a GA, a General Assembly with Rappler's about 100 people. And I told our team, I said, we're walking into a different time, and everyone's risk appetite is different. If you're afraid, or if your parents are afraid for you, let us know. We will help you find a job in another news group. Not one journalist took that. In fact, we got stronger. It was easier to manage Rappler because we were moving. We knew what we needed to do.
So you're now, because one of the things, I want to come to Marcos in a second, but just with Duterte, one of the things that emerged in your reporting was this sense that no one really in the Philippines had a sense of where the truth was. So we were internationally reporting the number of quote-unquote killings as part of the drugs war. And I think you quote at one stage this figure, 27,000.
That's from the Commission on Human Rights of the Philippines.
You think true?
So here's the gap, right? As reporters, we report what authorities say. So the Philippine National Police do their when President Duterte took office all the way to January 2017, the death toll was up around 7,000, and then it started getting rolled back in front of our eyes. We all have memories, and the 7,000 all of a sudden became 2,500, and you cannot just say it, right? So. And then there was the Commission on Human Rights, which at some point the Duterte administration tried to defund by just giving them only 1 peso as a budget. That's the one that said that, as of December 2018, it was at least 27,000. So in my country, the first casualty in our battle for the truth, for the facts, is exactly how many people were killed in this brutal drug war that happened. I knew, my team knew, because we had one reporter and a camera stationed at night, right? And they would go out. And right after the inauguration in 2016, they would be coming home with about 8 dead bodies a night, dumped on the sidewalk. You know this, right? You've seen it. Gagged, masking tape, and then it was like, I wish it was Gotham City because it wouldn't be real, but there was a cardboard sign that would say, "Don't follow me." It was in Tagalog, but "Huwag tularan." I'm a drug dealer, don't follow me. But these are, Amnesty International in January 2017 came out with its report. They used at least 7,000 people killed. But if you use these numbers, if you have memory, you get pounded. And that's part of when the attacks on Rappler began. First, the authorities themselves, our reporters, you're intimidated, but our reporters kept going.
Was there a pattern, Maria, of who believed Rappler and who believed the Duterte machine and state media?
I think Facebook, because 100% of Filipinos on the internet are on Facebook, right? Facebook is our internet. Because of that kind of friends of friends, and because information operations, this isn't misinformation. This isn't like somebody said something and, it's offensive. This is information operations. Because of that, people started being afraid. And when you're afraid to speak, that's the first sign that something is really wrong. And so the first part was, this could not have happened without Facebook, because we were attacked, right? So after we did the weaponization of the internet series, something I had never lived through, not in any conflict area, not in any war zone I had worked in, I received an average of 90 hate messages per hour. Per hour. And that's, the first thing I did was, is my data wrong? So I went back and looked, and at the beginning I was trying to respond to the hate messages. Then I realized they don't want responses. They're using free speech to stifle free speech. They want to pound us to silence. And they succeeded in large measures because people ducked. Fear does wonders.
But just address that with you for a second, because I think a lot of people here, actually one of their most profound ideas of the Philippines is actually about courage, is people power,
Yes.
Cory Aquino, protests on the streets. At the time...
Tanks and flowers.
Tanks and flowers.
Nuns.
And the idea... No, that's right, of course, there's amazing pictures of nuns. And you think to yourself, actually, people stood up to Marcos. Do you think that the nature of the information landscape is such now that you can't have a people power protest?
I can't say can't have, right? But the social media, the technology was an accelerant. In 1986, which was when people power happened, it took a long time to build up to that, right? Almost 21 years. And if you remember, one of the main catalysts was the assassination of Benigno Aquino Jr. He landed at the tarmac and was assassinated. And his body was paraded through the financial district of Manila. That was 1983. It took 3 years to build up the courage to do this, right? To do people power, where they stood on the streets and they were in between the military camp and the police national headquarters. So what's happened, the difference now is that people can't tell fact from fiction. It is dangerous to ask on social media. Social media acted like an accelerant, right? It like set fire to the kindling that was there. And when you distrust information, when you don't trust the news, when you don't have the facts, you cannot act. This is the problem for citizens in a democracy and civil society and journalists, because we were largely defenseless. I mean, what do you do when you get 90 hate messages per hour? Plus side, only the person being attacked, only the target gets to see all of the attacks, right? Everyone else sees bits and pieces like the parts of the elephant. So you may think, oh, Maria's not so accurate. I mean, oh, Maria, I heard a few times that this was, so you would hear bits and pieces floating, which we never had to do when I was with CNN, because the network was in front of us. We were not personally attacked. This is very personal. When you're the one, you get to see it all. It's overwhelming. But what you have to do is turn it into data.
Can I ask you...
Be a geek.
Can I ask you, do you think that Duterte and Marcos are rational in this sense? That actually they're right, given the nature of their rule and the sort of quote-unquote democratically elected autocrat model, that you need to suppress critical journalism? Or do you think you can just marginalize it? You can just ignore it? That actually creating an enemy out of you makes you into, among other things, a Nobel Peace Prize winner. You become a bigger person. Do you think their action is rational or self-defeating?
I think President Marcos, we say President Marcos now, right? I think President Marcos is TBD, right? Because during the campaign, he essentially marginalized traditional media. He granted no interviews, didn't answer any tough questions. And of course, our reporter, I don't know if Lian is here, but she shadowed the campaign and she bore the brunt of that. The closed-in camera, he was very much like Bolsonaro, where they have their own vloggers. The people who are closed in are the ones who are not from traditional news organizations. Let me not say anything that. And so he made traditional news irrelevant, and he won by an overwhelming margin. Yeah. So what he does and how he'll treat us, this is still TBD. And in that sense, some things have improved for the better. Our reporter in 2018. A month after they tried to shut us down, the palace guards prevented our palace reporter from entering. And I was told that Pia Renada, who was then in her mid-20s, and then myself were banned from the palace. And that ban from the palace extended to ban from anywhere President Duterte is. So we filed a case at the Supreme Court. It's still at the Supreme Court. Nothing has moved, right? But so in some ways, things improved under Marcos for Rappler, because when he went to the UN General Assembly, our reporter was with him. When he went to Cambodia, our reporter was with him, right? So, but having said that, the direct answer to your question, for President Duterte, it was a perfect storm, right? Just like with President Trump, it was the trickle-down theory didn't trickle down. Our improved GDP never got to the poor, and the gap between the rich and the poor kept growing and grew even more during COVID, like in many parts of the world. And he took advantage. They were able to take advantage of this technology that enabled them to move things faster. Could they have shut down? Could they have taken the franchise of the top broadcaster? I mean, imagine what's your biggest broadcaster here? BBC, right? Imagine if your government automatically said, BBC, we're taking away your franchise, and that's it. They did.
You're not the first person who's had that idea.
So I'm just saying this is where this is partly enabled by the technology that connects us.
And is it just so there were 14 cases against you, there are now 7 cases against you?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So in 2018, 14 investigations, 11 cases were filed. In 2019, I got 10 arrest warrants in less than 2 years, starting 2019. And then I started getting arrested. There was a 6-week period where I was arrested twice, and I kept thinking, this is very disruptive, And I guess, when COVID hit, I had 10 cases against 10 cases that we were fighting in court. It's a war of attrition because they're quite expensive. Our legal fees went from 0 to 30% of our operating expenses. That means 30% that's taken away from our journalists. Today I have, how many do I have? 9 at the start, now I have 7. And I have to ask for permission to travel. One case is already at the Court of Last Appeal, the Supreme Court. And in order to be able to travel now, the Supreme Court gave me permission, but also gave me restrictions. The first time I've seen this on what I can say about that case.
About this particular case. But the interesting thing is that the cases are after things you wouldn't necessarily expect, aren't they? They're kind of, they're tax, they're a lot about the financial. Why?
Because it's not a freedom of speech issue. It is not about being a journalist, right? And I think that's the point that was made. But I shouldn't really talk about this because the restriction is so broad that we filed a petition to actually clarify it. So let's just say you should read a little bit more about the cases, because that's already out there. I just can't speak about it now.
All right,
I am following the Supreme Court, the justices who I hope will have the wisdom.
If they're online, they will observe your respect for that particular gagging order. I can say that that's crazy and wrong. I want just to then draw the line that you draw, because one of the things that kind of makes you sit up when you gave that speech when you won the Nobel Peace Prize with Dmitry Muratov, but it makes you sit up when you read the book, which is it's not over there. This is not a Philippines problem. You kind of draw the line, obviously. And in fact, you draw the line through our country and Brexit.
Yes.
You draw the line to Trump. You draw it into
Yes.
Bolsonaro. And when you read the book, Maria, the reality, well, it's my experience of it was, you read the book and you think, this is brilliant. And then you get towards the end and you think it's not. You think this is really a problem. And it's very unclear what you think is going to be up to the job of restoring truth.
I lay out short, medium, and long term, right? The long term is education because that's important. The tech has changed so fast. The medium term is legislation. And the short term is hand-to-hand combat. It's each of us turning away from being a user or a consumer and becoming a citizen, and trying to redefine what civic engagement means in the age of exponential lies. The data is very clear, and there's been so much now that's been released, including the 10,000 plus pages, the internal Facebook documents that Frances Haugen released, right? This is extremely harmful. The social harms are clear. Imagine your kids growing up where this phone wants their attention. So in this attention economy, they live performative, curated lives, and they are trying to get the approval of the crowd that, like this, can turn into a mob. How do you find meaning, which is our goal? That's why you have to be a tortoise, slow, right? Understanding, because meaning is something, and this is early in the book, it is something that no one gives you meaning. You don't discover it by accident. It is, you build this into your life. And when the attention economy, there are 2 times that human beings, 3 if you include the slave trade, but twice that globally we've had the age of industrialization, 18th and 19th century, when it was labor, right? Factory production. So all of a sudden, I studied this in history in the United States, all of a sudden you had child labor, sweatshops, Dickens, and then what happened? Laws were put in place. The robber barons acknowledged and gave back to society what they had robbed. And then today, in this attention economy, what is the commodity, the human commodity? It is the market of our actions, our thoughts. It's your attention. It is what we are going to do. Predictive analytics in many ways, right? So this one is a buy and sell market, artificially created. Shoshana Zuboff describes it much better. I just describe it as when you do that, you have to ask when we lose free will, right? Because since lies spread faster, you have no facts. So this is a sentence I've said repeatedly. This is where I feel like Cassandra and Sisyphus combined. Without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these 3, we don't have a shared reality. We can't solve any problems. We cannot have democracy. So that's the key.
And what do you say to people who think, you know what, it may be, I'll come to you in a moment. So what do you say to those people who say, actually, you know what, Maria, that's true. We've had a really terrible decade and technology scrambled our brains for a bit. But bless the weather, boring is back. You look at the midterms in the United States, actually, there's a kind of sense that let's get sensible people, not whatever your position is, Republican or Democrat, the people who were purveyors of the big lie lost.
Largely.
And, in our country, actually, the whole idea is, can we just try and get back and do the work, right? At least in government, whether you think they're doing it right or wrong,
right.
There's a kind of competence premium back. Is it possible that actually society has educated itself? We have begun to understand how lies work online, and we're beginning to reject it.
You can't, all of us are being manipulated because this isn't rational thinking. It's not logical. It isn't how you see the world. It is your amygdala. It is your emotions that's manipulated. And if anything, the upside, because I always try to look for the positive, it actually shows us that regardless of country or culture, that we have a lot more in common than we have differences. We're manipulated in the exact same way through our biology. And then the very countries, the democratic nations that should be protecting us. In the United States, we have a Better Business Bureau, right? You can report. Why do Western countries put guardrails around genetics, CRISPR technology, but not around the technology that insidiously manipulates how we feel and what we think, right? I always use this quote by E.O. Wilson. He's a biologist who studied emergent behavior in ants, right? Like how all of the ants build an anthill. He said that the greatest crisis we face is our Paleolithic emotions, our medieval institutions, and our godlike technology. This is not something we can outsmart. It is literally manipulating our biology, and that needs to be stopped with legislation.
Well, I'm going to bring my colleague Luke Benham, who, for his sins, Luke, writes our Tech States sense maker. So he's a person who is kind of more immersed in this than is healthy. Luke.
I was really interested in particularly the short and medium term, the hand-to-hand combat and the legislation. You mentioned the Facebook files. Does it not seem problematic to you that Facebook's leadership said that wasn't clear evidence of anything really? What their response to it emerging in the public was that, that those studies aren't necessarily indicative, and the mental health problems could come from a variety of different factors, and they don't feel pinned down on the point that you've just made. And how big of a problem do you think that is?
I mean, if you read the book, the data is really clear, including geopolitical power, right? Like Facebook actually took down information operations from China that were polishing the image of the Marcoses. It was campaigning for the daughter of Duterte, Sara Duterte, who's now our vice president. It was attacking me, and it was creating AI-generated photos and fake accounts for the US presidential elections, right? So this is something that, look, I think what we've seen from Facebook, its reaction has been to deny and deflect, to quote other news organizations. Because they say it doesn't mean the facts aren't there. And I had long wished for enlightened self-interest for its leaders, something ASEAN, of course, ASEAN also has its problems, so let's not go there. But the data is really clear, and the impact on societies, on our democracies. 60% of the world today live under authoritarian rule. We've rolled back the number of democracies to 1989 levels. We are electing illiberal leaders democratically, and they are doing what they did in my country, which is to then crush the institutions from within. And then they're going one step further, which is they're not working alone. Anne Applebaum called it Autocracy Inc. I mean, we can also call it Kleptocracy Inc., right? You know this from Russian disinformation and the kind of the money laundering that goes through rich nations. There is both that kind of geopolitical power that is shifting the balance away from democracy. And I didn't write this in the book, but when we were going through the numbers of elections from 2022 to 2024, 2024 is a critical tipping point year. And what we're seeing now is something like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is set up by China and Russia. We rarely saw this before. China and Russia set up something for development, economics, and technology, right? So think about everything that can do. But there are African states that are there, but just in September, they brought in Iran, Turkey, and Myanmar, right? So this is, I feel like the world is reorienting. But again, this is a little bit back to the future, not with technology, but we've been through this before. In the book, I talk about white replacement theory that is part of the ideology, the state ideology of Hungary. Yeah. This is translated to Hungarian by 444, right? So this is, and that white replacement theory is the us against them, right? We've lived through this before.
But Maria, I mean, I'm going to ask my colleague Matt Dancona in a moment, if I can. But just so I understand what we're saying about the Shanghai Cooperation
Please.
Group, what you're saying is that those autocrats that have come in are getting coordinated and organised as a principle for running countries and for running, if you like, global systems.
I mean, let me ask you, Belarus, would it be a democracy today if Russia hadn't come in to help?
And that's what you see is happening in a coordinated way. My colleague Matt Dancona, who's an editor here, wrote the book that I steal all my ideas from about this, called Post-Truth. So it's the right thing to get.
Hi, Maria.
Hi.
To echo James, it's always a good idea to meet your heroes. So
I
it's
hope
wonderful to
no
see you.
feet of clay.
No, feet very much of marble. Fascinating what you said about legislation, because the gap, I mean, and you quote the Industrial Revolution, there's always a lag between technological change and legislation, that we're familiar with that in history. But I wonder, do you think this revolution is different in kind as well as in degree? Because unlike previous technological revolutions, it seems to be metastasizing and changing at both an extraordinary rate, but also, we're now looking at AI and its consequences and quantum computing with even the people who are doing the research not really knowing how far it might go.
Yes.
Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the people who govern electoral processes in this country are struggling with a statute. The principal legislation was passed in 2000, 4 years before Facebook even existed. And the present government, though, as James said, it is marginally more sane than the one that preceded it, which, if you're following the news, is sort of every 3 weeks or so, is still wrestling with an online harms bill, which is actually reflects to a certain extent good intentions, but is still a mess.
Yeah.
I just wonder, to look at it in a half full way, how do we get to a point where legislators can participate in the process of education that you talked about, so that they know what the hell they're doing? Because actually the gap between what they have to do and what they know, at least in this country, is quite scary.
I think in every country, right? Like, one of the best things I read early on was the subcommittee report that Damian Collins's committee did, right? Nigeria was in that because of the Cambridge Analytica scandal. It was the first one that looked at the entire world. This is new, it is fast. And actually, I think where legislators get lost, it's tough to be a government official today, right? Because the information ecosystem is corrupted. Lies spread faster than facts, right? If you're boring, you cannot spread your message, right? So they face this dilemma: are you going to be outrageous and get your message out and get elected, or are you going to stick to values and principles? I mean, we see this playing out. It's tough to be a government official today in this corrupted information ecosystem. I think the biggest problem we face is in the US, and you'll see this also in Europe now, is that there's a $70 million tech lobby, right? And most of the power isn't on social media. They may get attacked, but they've not had to, because they have real power. It was us. It was the people who didn't have power who came on social media and has been insidiously manipulated. Think about it like this, I think there's been more than enough time, and there have been more than enough books written, and evidence is clear, right? Weapons of Mass Destruction. Mm-hmm. If you haven't read it, you should read it. There's another one called Dopamine Nation, how this is mildly addictive, right? So I think at this point, even the people who built it don't allow their kids on it, right? We know that. TikTok, our newest one, not an American one, but there are two versions of TikTok. One for China and one that's exported to the rest of the world. The one for China has safeguards in place. If you're 14 years old and below, they stop you. You can only consume a certain number of hours per day. And they include educational videos in it. A friend, Tristan Harris, says, this is the spinach version of TikTok.
Yeah.
And they exported the opioid version of TikTok to you guys, to us.
But this is, but Maria, just to pick up on that, and your kind of like terrifyingly simple point, free speech, stifling free speech. But Matt actually went in front of David Collins's committee and gave evidence to it, and had an idea which I'm going to now get wrong, Matt, but which is about how do you make sure that this kind of government oversight happens on an annual basis?
Yes.
That's right.
Exactly. To have a sunset clause, which meant that Parliament was compelled to go back and look at its legislation on an annual basis, as it does terrorist legislation.
Yes.
I'd also say that in giving evidence, I was asked by one MP what an app was.
Yes.
Just to give you an idea of the problem.
And Maria, and I guess the question is like to the heart of this. This is a very like unpopular thing to say, which is it possible that China is doing this better than the West? That its lean in on technology means that, of course, it's very controlling, but in some ways it might also be more protective. Is that?
No, because in the end, it's about privacy, right? When we lose our privacy, we lose will, we lose independence. I think this is what it goes down to, right? So governments, what can they do? I think stop looking at it as a free speech issue and start thinking about it the way tech guys do, which is it's an iterative process. And I know some tech guys who are here who might want to talk, but it's an iterative process, right? They do rollouts of tech and then they check it. We could certainly ask, and I think that's what the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act do. They ask for, potential harms, but how do we really check them? The other thing is lawmaking needs to change in this age of exponential lies. Lawmaking must be iterative in the same way. And what does that look like? Look, like Uber, cars, taxis, that was changed. Airbnb changed all the other stuff. When it changed information,
It changes outcomes.
it changed outcomes.
Yeah.
It changed governance. And so governance must now change to deal with that. I think and look, I want it to happen fast enough so that I don't go to jail. This is a simple thing. My self-interest.
Yeah.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for being here. This is quite, I don't think Tuesdays get any more exciting than this. My name is Alexandra and I'm from Hungary. I study politics and communication at the LSE, so this is incredibly relevant for me. And I'm halfway through your book, so I don't really know the end yet. But I was wondering, going back to the idea that information was supposed to bring the public sphere to the internet, is there anything that makes you hopeful? Of course, like we turned out to be the product in this whole process, but I'm just wondering, of course, there are solutions that we can implement, like in the micro, macro, etc. But what makes you really hopeful for us?
I mean, we have no choice but to be hopeful, right? And I am hopeful because it's like throwing spaghetti against the wall until something works. And in our case, for our elections, you'll see this. We did a 4-layer facts first PH pyramid for our elections. Essentially, it was an influencer marketing campaign for facts, which are really boring and don't spread, right? So, it was the first time at the bottom layer, 16 news organizations, the first time we ever worked together. And I've been talking about working together since 2016 because of the way news organizations are competitive with each other. This one was very simple, and we did it with the help of Google News Initiative, and we did it with Midan, a startup, a company for fact-checking, so that it is also data-driven. 16 news groups, Creative Commons license, anyone can take these fact checks and do whatever you want with it. So some artists actually turned it into art. We had editorial cartoonists who turned it, the regional groupings, the hyperlocal news organizations, the smaller ones grew the most, and they printed it in the newspaper, all of the fact checks. The second layer is, we called it the mesh. And I made that up from, that movie, Don't Look Up?
Yeah.
Remember the planetary defense system came up like the mesh, like piece by piece, and you didn't know whether it was going to work or not. Well, this is kind of what we have to do in our area of influence. In the Nobel lecture, I talked about a person-to-person defense of democracy. Well, here, MESH was more than 100 civil society groups, NGOs, human rights organizations, business, the church. And their task was every day, this was an influencer marketing campaign for facts, they were supposed to share these boring fact checks with emotion. And we found that inspiration spreads as fast as lies. The third layer was the academics, the people who studied disinformation, who didn't have the data before. Now we gave them the data that's collectively ours. We signed a data privacy agreement with each other. And every week they told us which meta-narrative is against whom, who was winning, who was losing, how were we being manipulated. The layer 4, the most important one, are the lawyers. Free Legal Assistance Group, left-leaning, Integrated Bar of the Philippines, the Philippine Bar Association, the lawyers from left to right came together to protect rule of law because impunity online is impunity offline. And the lawyers, in less than 3 months, filed at least 21 legal cases, tactical and strategic, to protect the fact-checkers and to also protect the integrity of our votes. It was so successful. It's been our most successful campaign ever to retake the center of the information ecosystem. So successful that within 2 weeks, the Philippine government filed a petition at the Supreme Court, the Solicitor General, saying it was against Rappler. We always get blamed. Rappler and the Commission on Elections saying that fact-checking is prior restraint.
Can I
Sorry,
just one thing?
Yeah, go.
Can I just one thing? I'm going to come to you, Bruce, in one moment. This is going to sound self-interested because it really is. We're in the process here, Maria, at Tortoise, of trying to seek a judicial review against the Conservative Party over the non-disclosure of information, the secrecy around the running of the election. And when you say that 30% of your operating revenue is going into fighting legal bills, my heart goes out to you and a little to me. And I wondered, how have you managed that? How have you managed? It's one thing to go to investors and say, look, hey, I'm starting a cool new thing. It's going to, provide this food of journalism to communities. It's another thing to say, can you help me fund my ongoing legal costs? Have you, in all of the alliances you've built, thought of a way of bringing that alignment of journalism and law and fighting through the courts together? Do you see that working well anywhere?
That's part of what Facts First did. So the smaller news organizations that didn't have money for lawyers now they could go get pro bono help. Right? We were able to connect different groups together. It also spread courage, right? It was the smaller news organizations that, frankly, pushed the larger ones a little bit more. But I think the other part of this is that Rappler couldn't have survived this without our community, really. The community is critical. It was the kindness of strangers. They sent us money to pay our legal fees. It was the kindness of the international community. I don't know if I would not have been in jail if you didn't pay attention. And there's so many horrible things going on around the world to pay attention to, right? So it really, in the Nobel lecture, I brought out the T-shirt we had from 2014 before all the attacks began, which is be the good is in orange, but in order to be the good, you have to believe there is good in the world. That's the part that is missing on social media. That's the part cynics want you to forget. Cynicism is a tool of dictatorship, right? Because cynicism leads to inaction. So in this one, I don't know, we jumped because it was the right thing to do. And I don't know where it's going to lead. This is still, but the question people always asked is, where do you find courage? It was like a layer by layer by layer of values, of relationships, and courage isn't something that is out there. It is actually built into who you are, for what you believe in, right?
I'm just going to, I'd said about it here from Bruce,
just
one final thought.
not quite a question, but it was around what sort of enables this. So I'm Bruce. I run a company that advertises on social media.
Bruce. Be careful. You enable.
Yeah, and I try and do it. Ideally, it's for good things like green investment, but we use the same tools. So the enabler here is, the politics have jumped on a system that's been built for 100 years, which is convincing you that the right thing to do is to buy this cereal and not that cereal. Okay?
Yes.
And surely, the enabler here is the money that builds that system. Politics is riding on it, as it's always done. Thatcher, she worked out that slogans work better than speeches, and versus he. We've done this for years. So isn't surely the place we should attack is the money. These social media does not exist without money. Zuckerberg is not reporting his attention economy. He's reporting advertising revenue.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you take that away from him, he goes very quiet. And and this is perhaps what we've seen a little bit with Twitter, is these guys can turn the taps off in an instant, right? If you name and shame them. So their carbon footprint, their social media footprint is arguably as important as their carbon footprint.
So interesting.
So someone like Nike, what they spend online, these guys, they put themselves out there, they're trying to put out a positive message, but it's basically to sell trainers. Otherwise, why are they doing it? They're not idiots.
Yes. Well, so you're right? Advertisers, huge advertisers actually tried to do this in 2021. And they did it for 1 month. Stop the hashtag Stop the Hate. And then they went back. And now you ask there was a Pew survey that asked Americans, what do you want to be when you grow up? Influencer. And what did the Chinese say? Astronaut. Sorry, I'm because I come from this part of the world. So market cap of Facebook, it's dropped significantly, right? It's from its highest point, it's dropped 70%. We've in the last few weeks seen tech kind of implode. FTX has gone bankrupt. So again, it shows you the lack of regulations, I think, right? And then you have one man who we neither elected nor actually, except for the fact that he has a lot of money, now kind of changing whimsically what the global public square is, Twitter. And in America, the debate about Twitter is about free speech, not about the global public square, where there are lots of good things that have happened, right? The Iran, the protest on the jilbab, all of that. Me Too, there's lots of stuff. I think like now the harms outweigh the good, but it is still possible. So advertisers, what can you do? And can we do this? We've not been at this moment. This is a nadir, right? Is that right? The bottom. Yeah. So this is one of those times when maybe those activists, journalists, I wonder why the journalists aren't saying anything, because we're the first targets of attacks of information operations, because the end goal of this is to make our public lose their trust, don't know what to believe.
By the way, I think it's a really absolutely fascinating thing.
So what would you do? What would you do? Are you going to continue advertising?
I think the problem is that, we get drowned out. I think that we are regulated when we advertise.
Yeah.
Heavily. I can be fined very quickly if I say something that isn't true. This is, and the places where, say, Bitcoin has existed is in between our financial regulator and our advertising regulator. So they could say what they like for a while until we pointed it out that each regulator thought the other was doing their job.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So that allowed Bitcoin to exist. And I think at the moment we're not regulating, and I've seen the numbers where, 170, if you like something 170 times, Facebook knows you better than your partner.
Yes.
Okay, so that's 170 times. So you've all given Facebook more information than you've given your partners, right?
Yes.
200 times, God knows what they know about you. They know, that's when they start to know you better than yourself. So it's and that data was shared with people like the Bank of England. This is known stuff, right?
Yeah.
But we're not acting on it and saying, have advertisers, we're not allowed, for example, to put subliminal images into cinema advertising anymore, right?
Exactly.
So we stop that.
Yeah.
Why don't we just ban it in that way? You know?
I think that's one. I mean, I should just say that I think Kate, my wife, would say that I've said the same things at least 170 times. So I'm amazed by that. But I think there is something really interesting in this, Bruce. We were talking about this having come in yesterday morning after the Infantino press conference, saying to ourselves, who has any check on the power of FIFA, right? And it's not governments and regulators, and it's not obviously consumers. Actually, weirdly, it's probably 10, a dozen marketing directors of huge companies,
Yes.
ditto Twitter, ditto
Yes.
Facebook. And, you know, going back to your initial point, Maria, about speaking truth to power, I think we as journalists are learning where the power is.
Yes.
And we've always addressed governments,
Yes.
right? And we haven't always understood not just the organisations, but where within those organisations the power lies.
Yes.
We can and should mill
Yes.
around here in a newsroom and kind of chew this over. But I'm going to ask you one final question, because
Sure.
some people will have to get away. Maria, the one last question is this. So someone asked about sort of where you get your sort of inner strength, one of the people joining us online. And you write about yourself, you end this book by saying that the qualities that have sort of driven you and you sort of shaped the book through are these: honesty, vulnerability, empathy, moving away from emotions, embracing your fear, and believing in the good. And it's the last one I just wanted to ask you about. There have definitely been times in the last few years, and certainly in the weeks of 2022, that we've sat around asking ourselves whether or not it's true that the arc of history bends towards justice.
Yes.
And I wonder whether or not you think it does.
I think that the timelines have been corrupted by the tech, right? But in general, it always has. I've covered, so I began my career with Belinda, with After People Power. I tracked, it was the shift from authoritarian one-man rule in Southeast Asia to democracy, right? And in 1998, it was the end of Suharto's almost 32-year rule. And then it was in Czechoslovakia, Václav Havel actually paid tribute to Filipinos. This is like, we thought democracy was unstoppable. But now at the tail end of my career, it is going the other direction. And I am deathly afraid that we will lose it. I just want you to know that you must do it with your eyes open, right? And so, do I think the art? If we can stop the if human comprehension can catch up with the insidious manipulation of power. And this is, I mean, we've seen this, how quickly this happened in the Arab Spring. In 2011, one of the inspirations for Rappler was how leaderless networks, which that can also be a mob, but you'll see this, I lived through this in Indonesia, how leaderless networks helped bring the Arab Spring. And then by 2014, 2015, it was already turning into the Arab Winter, because real power, like governments who have real money and can exploit this, did. And so it turned into the Arab Winter. I think we're at this pivotal moment. The world that we lived in is destroyed. And part of our problem is we keep using the same words that now are meaningless. Like a word like democracy when China uses it. Or, engagement. You're like, what is real engagement? This flattening of meaning. And I think we need to come back and really aggressively look at the world today and say, if you're an advertiser, right? Like, there were limits to how television can manipulate what we have. And we all saw the same thing, and we could hold power accountable. You could hold us accountable. And we had consciences, and name and shame worked. These things don't work today. So this is our dilemma. What are we going to do? And I think that's part of the reason I don't pretend to have all the answers. I can say I keep trying.
Ladies and gentlemen, Maria Ressa.